Okay, so in conclusion, to Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, what can we say about Aristotle's approach to ethics? Well, his approach is called virtue ethics. Remember, we were doing with Nietzsche, we were doing sort of meta ethics or going beyond ethics to try to figure out if there is anything like that. We saw where Nietzsche led. Aristotle, writing 2,500 years before, his approach to ethics is what's called virtue ethics or character ethics, developing your character. But some of the assumptions of Aristotle, obviously, are the objectivity of goodness. And what he means by goodness, Aristotle, is what's good for me. Remember, his virtue ethics, his ethics of eudaimonia or human flourishing, is based on a common human nature, and therefore the objectivity of human nature, and therefore the objectivity of human flourishing, and therefore the objectivity of goodness. Now, why? Well, if humans have a similar nature, that means what's good for you will likely be good for me. And remember, goodness for Aristotle, and this is important, is what's good for you. What's good? It's not necessarily, although it is what's good in itself. But what's good in itself, he means by that what's good for you, i.e., what's useful to human flourishing, what's conducive to human flourishing. So for Aristotle, the objectivity of goodness comes from the very fact that there are objective states or behaviors that enable us to flourish. Okay, and we saw those states are what satisfy, or excuse me, those behaviors are what satisfy the rational element in us, the spiritual and social element in us, and ultimately has to do with reason dominating emotion, inculcating certain habits, which good habits we call virtue, and there are four essential habits for Aristotle. But we saw that even with those four essential habits, that the human being needs something more, namely love. And it's a bit cliche, but Aristotle is saying love is ultimately what makes human beings happy. Philia, friendship, because they need to share their soul, and moreover, they need to. This is the best way to inculcate habits. It's the best way to grow in moral virtues, and it's the best way to flourish is through friendship. So, and we saw, of course, how Thomas Aquinas appropriated that. But here we have a picture of human existence that says it's about living a rational, disciplined life, and it's about controlling your emotions. And if you can learn anything from this, several things. It's who you hang around with is very important, but even more basic than that is don't make decisions based on emotion. Make them based on rationality. I look over my life and I think of all the decisions I've made based on emotion versus all the decisions I've made based on reason. The ones that I based upon reason always work out, and the ones on emotion don't, because emotion needs to be tamed. It's not as though we live an unemotional life. It's that we live a holistic and integrated life between our emotions and our rationality. And ultimately, the most important decisions you'll make will have to do with your love life. And not just your romantic life, but who you surround yourself with. So, friendship is so important, and who you hang around with is so important to moral virtue. And moral virtue and living a rational, good, contemplative, theoretical life, rational existence, existence of love, they're all the same thing for Aristotle. And all these things are conducive to human flourishing and self actualization, and then in the end, happiness or eudaimonia.